So friends, in our last video, we created this list and we created this form. Now we will create API to save this form and create the API to update this form. So when user will click on add user button, it will land here to add the user, and same when any user will click on edit, it will land to the same form with the user ID with the different URL, but the form is the same. So first we will create add user method. So let's create a method to save the form. So in this particular component, we have this state, username and email, and we have this handle change event. Here we are changing the state of this controls, and we have this button, save button, and on clicking on this button, we are calling this function. So here we will call our save method. So first we will update the state and add one more key value ID 0 like this, because ID is required to update the form. So now we will create our save method. Save user. So we are creating save user function. In this particular function, we will call API. So API will be the same, only we will change the method and we will pass the payload. So API will be the same. And here we will pass the method and we will pass some header. Header is content type applications as JSON, because we are passing JSON request. And in this particular API call, we will pass this body to save the data. So we will pass the JSON body. So we are passing like name. So our name is stored in state. So from the state, we will get the name and email. So email is the same from the user state, user email. And we will convert this data in stringify. So JSON.stringify is the function to convert JSON data in the string format. So we need to convert it to string format to send in the post payload. So this is our API call. We are calling actually we are calling this API with the post method and with the JSON payload. So it will save the data, and then we can get our response from this response parameters. So initially we can just console log it over here, what response we are getting after saving. So we have created our function, but we have not called this function anywhere. So we have this handle click function. In this handle click function, we will call this function save users. So when user will click on this button, it will call this function and save the data. So let's uh, let's test this function. We can simply click on this add user and we have this form. Now we can send some name John Doe, John Doe, test at AOL.com, and we can open our network tab to see what request is going in, what response we are getting. So when we are clicking on the save button, it is calling this user API, and I think there is some issue with this API. It is saying unsupported media type. So let's check what is happening. So friends, we passed wrong header name. Actually, we need to pass headers and we are passing headers. That's why we are facing the error. So we need to add s over here. Now we can test the save method again. So we can add test at gmail.com and clicking on this save. Now we are able to save our record. So friends, we have added save method. Now we need to add the edit method. So on clicking on this edit button, first it should populate the data from the record number 1. So first we need to fetch the record and then we will populate it. So in this particular component, we will write another method to fetch the user record. So we will use hook and we will use useEffect hook to fetch the correct user record from the ID. So first we will call this hook only once, and then in this function we will create another function fetch user data, and in this function we will write API call. So to fetch the data, the first we will define our API URL, and that is the same actually localhost 8080 slash API slash users. And one more thing we need to pass is the ID. So because we are fetching the record, so it required the user ID. So we will pass the ID, and we are getting the ID from use param over here. So this use param hook will read the ID from the URL. So ID is already over here in the URL, and this use param will fetch it and store it in the ID variable, and we are passing this ID variable in the API URL. Now we can execute this API from the fetch method. API URL, and we can store the response in response variable. Then we can get the user detail from this response object. This is how we use the fetch method. First, we need to call the API, then we have to fetch the JSON response like this. Fetch is the inbuilt API from the browser. So we are using the fetch. Now we can console log the user detail and we can check what response we are getting from the API. So as you saw that we are calling this use effect loop only once. So it should call every time when we will get the new ID. So we need to define the ID in the dependency array. Okay. So we have defined this fetch user data. Now we should call this fetch user data below this below the definition of this function. Now we can check it. We can just refresh it and we can see what response we are getting. So we are getting the user detail from the API. Our API is executing successfully and we are getting the response over here like this. Now we can populate this data in the form. So we have this data in the user detail and now we can set this state because our username and email is in this state. So we can populate the data in the user detail. So we will set the state by this function set state. So this is our standard method of setting the state. So this is our standard method of setting the state. We will pass the function in set state to set the state. And in this function, we will return the new state. So we have name and name is coming from user detail dot. We can check it name, name, then email. So user detail dot email and ID. So user detail dot ID. Now, and we can also pass the previous state. It is not required because we are setting all the state, but we can adding it for our practice. So we have set all three parameters. Now we can check in the browser. So it did not set. So we need to check what happened actually. So actually we are getting the wrong state. It is username and user email and ID is the same. So now we can check it again. So let's see. So friends, now you can see our form is being populated. So when we will click any of the user, it will populate with the records. It will fetch the record and it will populate the form. Now we can edit this form and save it again. So friends, to update the record, we need to write another method. In this condition, if we will click on the save, it will try to create the record with this information, but we need to update the previous record. So in order to update the record, we need to define another function. So we can define update user. So we can define update user. So we will call the API and we will store the response in the response object. And we will use the same fetch method with the same API URL. Here we will define our API to update the record. And here we need to pass the ID because we are updating our record. So we need to pass the ID and our ID is stored in the state because we have set this ID here from the state. So we can just pass the state.id. So we have defined our URL. So now we need to define our method. Now we will use the method put because we are updating the record. So we need to set the put method and headers will be the same. Content type, application slash JSON. So this is the same content type, and now we need to pass the body. So it is also will be the same. We can copy paste the same line from here like this. So we have defined our API. Now we can get the response from this response object, and we can just console log it to check what response we are getting. So here we have defined our update user. Now we need to call our update user function over here like this. But we can't execute both function on the same time. So we need to call save user when user is creating new record, and we need to call this update user when user is trying to update the record. So we need to add a condition over here. So we have our ID in ID variable like this, and we can check through this ID. So if ID is greater than 0, then we will call this update user, else we will call this save user. So ID may be because we are getting this ID from the URL. So JavaScript can consider it as a string. So we can parse it in integer, then we can check. Now through this code, when user will click on the save button, it will call update user when ID will be available, and it will call the save user when user is trying to create the new record. So we can check it now, and we can open up our console. Now we can update it. So we have successfully updated the record. We can check by changing the name, and here we can check change this John Smith or somewhere else. So like you can see, we are able to update the record. But when user will update or add, it should move to the list again. So we need to add a redirection after adding or updating record. So to redirect to the list view, we need another method, useNavigate. Through the useNavigate, we will navigate user to the list view. So after saving, this is the root level like this. Yeah, we can test it again, edit it. So we are able to edit it. So friends, you saw that how we implemented add and edit user and how we face the user in this particular form. You can check the implementation. First, we created this save method to save the user data. Then we created this update method to update the user data. And then we call this both function in this handle click. that is calling from this button on click. And in this particular function, we updated or add the user data. And also we use this use effect hook to fetch the user data from the API, and we populate our form from this API. And we use this use navigate hook to navigate to the list view page. So friends, you can saw how we implemented our add and edit method in the user management form. So friends, in the next video, we will add the delete method in this particular form. So friends, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button, and please share my video. Thank you.